I know I need to put myself out there a bit more, but I'm also not willing to settle. I think I've been in relationships in the past that I probably would have left a lot earlier if I'd known my worth and my value. And I think I put up with things because I thought, well, what else is there for me? Because I didn't, like myself as much as I sound like an asshole, but like, I like myself now. I like myself. I think I'm a pretty cool person.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our newest show here on The Financial Diet, Just Getting Good. The concept, though, of Just Getting Good, which I so named it because I think for a lot of people generally and a lot of these women that I'm going to speak to, things are only just getting good at a much later age than many of the ages you guys are watching this show at. Is just to sit down and speak with women over the age of 50. We're going to talk to women at all different ages. Some are just turning 50, some are well past their 50s, about life, love, money, aging, and everything that they have learned up to now. But again, to be clear, they are very much still in the process of learning because guess what? Learning and growing never ends. And if it has, then that's a major, major problem. So each week in Just Getting Good, we are going to talk to a different woman about slightly different subjects, although I do have a list of rapid fire questions that I will be asking all of them at the end of the show to get their different takes on the same issue. I wanted to say a quick thank you to the sponsor and, in my opinion, perfect partner for this series, Advisor.com. So we partnered with Advisor.com to create Just Getting Good because in addition to, I think, reframing how we think about aging, I think it's also very important to reframe how we think about taking care of our own financial lives and investing in our financial futures. A lot of us watching this are really wanting to step into kind of our grown woman era, both personally and financially. And for me at 36 years old, a big, big part of that financially was working with a financial advisor. Not only is it something really helpful for me who, as a person, doesn't love getting super in the weeds of all of the math and the calculations and thinking about all of the minor details when it comes to money. I like being able to have sort of a trusted advisor to help me with that. But also I'm in the age where I'm going through a lot of major life choices, major purchases. I'm making big decisions about, saving, planning for my retirement, building wealth, all of that stuff. And to have a trusted professional who can help take me through all of those decisions and just provide sage advice, even for something as simple as like the market is really scary, what is going on? I can call him and he can tell me. So working with a financial advisor has been life-changing for me and one of the big things that sort of ushered me into what I feel like is a more grown woman era than I was in before. Not to say this is my final form, I will keep evolving, but I highly, highly endorse Advisor.com. We all do here at TFD. We've worked with their team for a very long time. They're a small boutique financial advisory that works on a flat fee basis, which means you pay the same regardless of how much money you have. And it also means their advisors work for you and not for commissions. They are a wonderful, very dedicated team. They operate in total transparency. They also offer an exclusive discount for TFD viewers, which you can access at the link in our description. And just generally, I think they are a wonderful financial advisory service, especially for people who are just starting their financial advisory journey, because again, that flat fee makes them a lot more accessible and more transparent than other financial advisories. So anyway, I highly endorse Advisor.com. As I said, there is an exclusive discount. And thank you to them for sponsoring this show because I really do think they're the perfect partner for the vibes of Just Getting Good. All right, I'll see you in our conversation. Lindsay, thank you so, so much for being here. I would love if you could start us off by just introducing yourself. Tell us who you are, if you could, how old you are, a little bit about you, what you do.
Okay, my name's Lindsay Owen. I'm 52. I'm going to be 53 in a couple of months. I'm from the UK originally. I've been in New York about 15 years this time around, although I was here briefly in the 90s as well. I now work as a real estate agent in Brooklyn and Manhattan, working with buyers and sellers and landlords. I didn't used to do that. I've had many different iterations of myself in my life. I'm a single parent. I have 2 teenage children. One of them I just sent off to college, so soon to be an empty nester as well. Does that sum it up?
That sums it up. Tell me, at what age did things start getting good for you?
Honestly, I don't think things started to get good for me on a really personal level until I was pretty well into my 40s. I mean, it definitely started to get good for me when I had my children. I'm not saying that wasn't like a pivotal point in my life. Of course it was. But, when you have children, your identity changes enormously overnight. And you go from being someone who's, pretty self-involved to someone who is just, your own identity is way down on the list of priorities. So I think for me, it wasn't really until I was pretty far into my 40s, maybe my mid to late 40s. Is that a depressing idea that it takes that long for things to get good?
No.
I don't know, but
That's awesome.
It took a while. And I think I had a long period of time when I did have children, or when my children were young, and I was a stay-at-home mum for like 7 years, and not through choice, honestly. But I felt pretty, invisible. I felt like what was important to me wasn't really that important to anybody else. Very focused on my kids. So it wasn't really until I think I kind of got back to work, and then once I started to become successful at work, and I also, divorced my children's father and sort of started to have more of a meaningful experience, with myself in general, that things started to turn around. So I'm a late bloomer, quite a late bloomer, I think.
How do you describe this kind of better relationship with yourself? What does that mean in practice?
Well, that's a work in progress. That's a continual work in progress. And I think it is for anybody, because I think that even that relationship with myself has got exponentially better, even in just the last few years. I think it's really important, whatever your situation, whether you're a parent or not, outside of work, outside of parenting, having time where you think about what you want in life, having a focus on that too, because without that, you're just, what is life really? I think in the last few years, I've been single for most of the last kind of 5 years. I've had a couple of relationships, that I think the longest one lasted about a year, but I would have classified myself as mostly single in the last 5 years. And so I've changed from being someone who in the past always wanted to be in a relationship to now having kind of pretty high standards about that and not wanting to settle. And along the way, I've really got used to being on my own and really comfortable with being on my own. And I actually just really like myself now. And I think that takes a long time if you come from, I don't know, a kind of paradigm of when I was younger where goals were, have a relationship, get married, have children, work, yes, but like I was never really focused on that when I was young. I worked from a very young age, but that was never my priority. So I think when you're coming from that perspective to suddenly be at a different time in your life where I've had my children and I've been married, it was okay,
Yeah.
The children were great, but I'm not focused on those same things. So that creates a space in your life to focus on what you want, what makes you happy, what interests you. And I think I'm just a lot more forgiving of myself and a lot less focused on a relationship being success in life, or meaning that I'm successful. I think I'm pretty successful in life, and I don't mean just work, but I think I'm pretty successful in my life, in my own sort of self, Does that make sense? I feel like I kind of...
No, it makes sense. Well, so you're divorced.
I am.
Tell me a little bit about not just sort of the process of getting divorced, if you're comfortable sharing sort of what led you to getting divorced, and sort of any advice that you might have specifically to women who are in relationships, in marriages that they feel may not be right, but are quite frankly very scared of getting divorced.
It's a very scary thing to contemplate getting divorced, because you're not just divorcing a person, you're kind of divorcing a whole life you've built together, right? Yeah. And particularly if there's children involved. And I get asked this quite a lot. I think for a while I was kind of the poster girl for divorce amongst lots of my friends. And I still have people reach out to me, strangers even through social media, who cotton on to the fact that I'm divorced, and have even recently someone reached out and asked me that question. And I think what I tell my friends generally, or anyone who asks me, is that you have to do everything you can, first of all, particularly if there's children involved. You have to try, having a relationship is work. You have to put that work in. You have to get therapy. You have to, own the stuff that you're bringing to the table and bringing to the relationship. I think that's the only way you get to walk away knowing that you've done everything and feeling okay about that yourself, and okay about that if there's children too. I think everyone deserves to be happy. And I think that's something that I struggled with for a long time when I was, unhappy in my relationship. I felt like I'd made my bed, and that you know, if I wanted out of that relationship, that it would hurt my ex-husband, that it would hurt my children. And I just had kind of resigned myself to the fact that I'd got myself into this kind of situation, so maybe I didn't deserve to get out of it. And then it took my son, who he was around, I think he was about 3 or 4 when this, I mean, he was 4 when we separated, but I think he was 3 or 4 when this happened. I'd just given him his dinner, and he was like sat at the end of our dining table, and I was in the kitchen kind of like peeking out and, you know, looking at him to check he was okay while I was tidying up in the kitchen. And I think I said something like, oh, Jackson, you know, Mama loves you so much, you know. And he looked at me and he said, I love you too. And he said, and Dada loves you a little bit. Sometimes he hugs you. And I just thought, whoa, he's noticing, you know, he's noticing that we're not, you know, affectionate, or that we're not being loving towards each other in his presence. And I think that was incredibly freeing for me, because I just thought, I'm not going to raise my children and give them an example of what's supposed to be a loving relationship that's not, because they're just going to grow up thinking this is what I'm going to emulate in my own relationships. And I didn't want to do that to him. So that was kind of one of the first things that made me think, oh, okay, this isn't just about me. Maybe I wouldn't be hurting my children as much as actually helping model a better situation for them. And I have to say, I think, and I still stand by the fact that I think I'm a much better parent modeling what it looks like to be a successful, and I don't mean necessarily just in work, but having a successful life means a lot of things to me. It means having friendships, it means having, you know, the work stuff too, but it means having your own interests and thriving in that regard. But I think it's much better for me to model a successful life and a happy single life than it is to model resentment and sadness and, you know, all those things to my children. I think that's more inspirational.
Now, you mentioned that you were a stay-at-home mother, kind of not by choice. And then post-divorce, you sort of had to rebuild a career later in your life, essentially from zero, and real estate agent. I know you'd mentioned when we talked before this interview that it was kind of one of the few jobs that would be available that, you know, didn't necessarily require a specific degree, that you could jump into, that could have the chance to make enough money for you and your children to get by. Can you talk about the experience of having to go into that career at that point in your life, and kind of specifically what it's like to go from being a woman who was entirely financially dependent on your husband to sort of having to make your own way financially, kind of essentially overnight?
Yeah. I mean, it was scary. And I hadn't been completely financially dependent on him, because I'd worked as a midwife in the UK, and I'd worked in marketing when we met. But coming to New York meant that I had to give up midwifery, because they would have had me go back to college for like 6 years when I was already a midwife. So I didn't want to do that, and I couldn't do that because my kids needed me at home. And the part about not having a choice was literally because when we'd come here, I didn't have a working visa. I had a legal visa, but it wasn't one I could work with. So that's a little bit of that backstory. But yeah, I had to start over when I was I've been a real estate agent almost 10 years now. So I think I was 44. And it was one of those things that I thought, what kind of job can I get where I can earn decent money, where there's not a long process for me to be able to start working. People had said to me, oh, your accent's fantastic, you do really well in real estate. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I could kind of, posh it up a little bit, and maybe, I'm a little nosy and curious about how people live. And I'd worked as a midwife too, and so I was like very used to supporting people through these big life transitions, and that I thought that could carry over. So I kind of gave it a go, hoping that it would work, and did my classes and got my license and everything. And I don't think it was until I was working with another agent who was a more experienced agent, who asked me to work with him, with this couple who I'm actually still in touch with the wife now. They were making like a $10 million purchase. Actually, we went to see something in Trump Tower one day at 1 Central Park West. And
jump scare.
Yeah, exactly. And thankfully they didn't buy that well. But we were walking out of the subway, and I think I'd been doing some work for this broker, getting comps together or whatever. And he turned to me and he said, you're a natural at this. And I remember thinking, oh my God, thank you for saying that, because not that I thought that, but it was like a lifeline, because I just thought, maybe this can work,
Yeah.
And I said to him at the time, I said, well, this has to work, because I didn't know what my other options were. I'd thought about going back to advertising, which I'd worked in a long time ago, but honestly, the people that were my contacts in advertising, who are now like, CEOs and things,
Sure.
were just like, Lindsay, I don't think you want to work in advertising. It's like super long hours. I don't know how you'd manage it with your kids, yada,
How
yada,
old
yada.
were your children? Sorry to interrupt. How old were your children when you were starting in real estate?
They were 4 and 6 when we separated, and it was 10 years ago. So they would have been 4 and 6 basically. No, 6 and 8. I can't do math. There we go.
6 and 8.
6 and 8. Yeah. But it was funny. Like, it wasn't that long before I went back to work. I remember, because raising kids on, at home on your own is pretty challenging. Particularly if you're someone who has, worked professionally in the past and who wants to be stimulated mentally and everything. I loved being at home with my kids, but I needed something else too. And I remember one day, like, lugging both my kids up 4 flights of stairs in a heat wave with like shopping and, school stuff, and they were like fighting with each other and everything. And I got to the top of the stairs and sat down outside our apartment door and just burst into tears, because I was so frustrated with, the intensity of being at home all the time and not having something else to focus on and not using the potential that I knew I had. And my daughter, who was like 6, just looked at me and said, Mama, I think it's time you went back to work. From like the mouths of babes.
No kidding. I was like, your kids are very good at giving you extremely pointed observations about
exactly.
your own life.
It was kind of obvious. And I'm very grateful that, it's turned out to be a job that I didn't just need, but that I enjoy. And I am good at it, and so that gives me a lot of autonomy. It gives me a lot of pleasure. It gives me a lot of pleasure to help people within that role. It's a very helping role, just like midwifery was.
Mine have historically not been particularly helpful, but I'm a terrible client for a real estate agent.
Well, I mean, there are lots. I mean, I think probably in any industry, there are people that give that industry or that job a bad rap, know, but there are also the good ones. And
for sure.
And I think you have a real opportunity to really help people. I've used this line so many times when I've talked about the similarities between working as a real estate agent and working as a midwife, but it is all about, for me, transition. I'm like fascinated by transition. I was never a midwife because I think babies are cute. Like, yeah, they're cute, but they all kind of look the same when they're born.
Not at birth, they're not that cute.
No, they just look like they've been beaten up, honestly. Yes. But so it was never about that. It was more about me helping women in the transition to becoming parents. Sure. And empowering them and, like, telling them that they could do this thing that is like a big thing to do. And, similarly in real estate, people are really vulnerable. They're going through huge transitions. It's very complicated in New York. It's not, it's a very different role in New York City than it is in the rest of the country. And people need support, and they need that sort of, guide who will go, okay, but did you think about, like, you're just there to sort of sense check things with them. And when it's really good, it can be life-changing. I mean, I have my friend Gregoire, who I helped move here from Paris, actually. He and his wife wanted a pied-à-terre originally, and I ended up finding them something that was completely off plan and off budget, but I just had a sense that they were going to love this place. It was like double their budget, but I was like, you have to see this place. They liked it so much that they moved here full-time and moved their whole lives here. And every time, and it was a long process as well, and it was, there were lots of ups and downs and dramas along the way and everything. And every time I see him, he like wells up with tears and just goes, you changed our lives. You changed our lives, So if I can be on my, deathbed and look back and think, yeah, I was in real estate. It wasn't what I dreamed of being when I was, a little girl. I didn't think one day I'm going to sell luxury real estate in New York City, Not that that's not a great dream to have, but if I can look back at my life and go, there were people whose lives I changed. There was people whose lives I changed when I helped them give birth. And there are people who are sitting in homes that have been life-changing for them that I helped to facilitate. So it's not a bad job to have. I feel pretty lucky,
Real estate is a very interesting thing financially, because I think at once it's sort of over and underestimated as an opportunity to build wealth. I think on the one hand, people treat owning a home or buying a home as sort of an automatic off-ramp toward financial stability, because we're always told, renting is throwing your money away and you've got to buy. And I think that's a very incomplete piece of advice, and it's a huge asterisk, which is depends on what you're renting and depends on what you're buying. Yeah. However, I also think that not enough people necessarily go into the transaction of a home thinking about it through financial terms and what it will mean for their ability to save, their ability to kind of outpace the market, their ability to make meaningful upgrades to the home, all of those things. I'd be interested, for the people, a lot of people watching this are probably in the space where they're thinking of buying a home in the next few years, or maybe they're right at the sort of precipice of doing it. From a financial perspective, do you have any kind of golden rules that you give to clients for making a home not just a great emotional and life decision, but a good financial decision?
I think the main reason buying a home is a great investment is it's the only investment that you can live in, full stop, and I think whilst I'm, very much into investing money in the market as well, I think that the fact that you can live in that investment, the fact that you can also make money on the bank's money if you use taking out a mortgage, and the fact that there's tax deductibility, parts to that scenario too, that you can tax deduct your mortgage interest and your property taxes, makes it an incredible investment. Of course, it's not going to grow necessarily at the same rate that your Nvidia stock might, but it's also more solid than that kind of investment. And I see so much generational wealth that, like you were talking about with your parents, that has been generated from, blue collar working class families that just bought something in the right neighborhood way back when. I mean, I've sold apartments to, women in their 20s and 30s whose parents just happened to buy an old brownstone in Brooklyn, in the 70s, and now have enough money that they can buy their child a home cash because of that purchase. Obviously it was a lot more affordable at that time and a lot more accessible to those kind of families, and that's something that is a difficult pill to swallow. I'm not from a lot of money. I don't come from a wealthy family, and it's interesting to me to work with lots of my clients who do have this sort of generational wealth that they're buying in trusts, or they have homes gifted to them. But I think that your investment in your property is, if you can make it a long-term investment, that's always a better situation. It's always a better scenario. I think if you're looking to buy property with a view to kind of getting in and out within 2 or 3 years, then invest your money somewhere else. Like, it's not the closing costs you'll pay at either end of the transaction and the risk of it not appreciating enough in time, it's not going to make you money unless you're fine with that. I'm selling something at the moment that my clients only lived in for 4 years. They'll make a bit of money on it, but not much after their closing costs. But in that scenario, they're okay with that because it was a stopgap before they could buy a bigger property that they wanted to do along the way. And in that sense, you can look at that period of time as equivalent to renting. You can look at it and just go, okay, I didn't make any money, but I lived in a great place. I still had the tax deductibility. I still had those benefits. I think if you're looking for 5 to 7 years onwards, that's when you start to make money on property. And if you can hold on to it even longer term, it's a great investment. I mean, personally, I bought my own house in 2019. Just before you bought your place, and like rates then, they were low. They weren't as low as they got in COVID. They were at about 3.5. They'd been at 4 or 5. So it was a quiet year, 2019, for transactions. I mean, and given that I was buying my own place then, I kept thinking, what is up with people? Like, why is no one buying? Money's like 3.5%. This is crazy, but now for me, I'm kind of playing that game of thinking, well, when am I going to sell this? Because I'm, soon to be an empty nester. Soon, I think this should be a category of its own, by the way, the soon to be empty nesters, because I think there's a whole lot of thinking that goes on at that point in your life. But my thoughts about my investment myself at the moment are like, how long do I hold on to it for?
Yes.
How much do I want it to appreciate? And, and looking at that sort of downsizing piece to it. Like, if I can hold on as long as I can, it will appreciate more. So I'm going to have a bigger contribution from my house towards my retirement too, because once I downsize, I'm not going to need all the money from the house. I'm not going to need a property this size when my kids are gone. So it also becomes a retirement piece, because hopefully it will have appreciated enough to contribute to my retirement too. I think you just have to be really sure that you can afford what you're buying, that it's not going to leave you feeling anxious every month or make you feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck, and that on a simple basis that you can afford that monthly payment, because you're going to, in the end of the day, you're going to live in your payment. You're not going to live in the price of the apartment. I say that to people all the time when they're in highest and best situations. That extra 10,000 or whatever, you feel like it's a lot of money, but it's going to affect your payment in a very small way. And that's the more important thing, is like, how comfortable is that monthly payment?
Yeah.
So I would advise people, real estate's a great investment, but only if you're doing it realistically, and realistically in terms of what you can afford.
Now, you were a midwife, as you mentioned, and you also, it sounds like you had your children in your later 30s. Is that right?
I was 34 and 36. Yeah.
34 and 36. Okay. So mid 30s. Tell me a little bit about sort of the experience of having kids for you. Did you always know you wanted children? Was it just because you wanted them with your husband, or how did all of that work for you? How did you come to the decision, and was it sort of intentional to do it at the age that you did it at?
I did always want children. It wasn't just about my husband. I knew I always wanted children. And in terms of age, I met him when I was 27. So we were together about 5 years before we got married. And then I actually qualified as a midwife in the same week that I got married. So I kind of wanted to just do that.
Work.
Yeah. I went to college late. I didn't finish high school.
Oh, wow.
Another fun fact. I dropped out of high school in my senior year. I'd been sick. I'd been hospitalized in my junior year, and I missed a lot of what I should have repeated the year. And it was a very high performing, like high pressure school, and that didn't happen. So I dropped out of high school and worked, yada, 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 worked in media for close to 10 years, and then went to university when I was 29. So by the time I qualified, I wanted to work for a few years and then have my children. And I think that was a good age for me to have children. I say to my kids all the time, don't have kids till you're 34. It's not because I was 34. It's just because I want them to have an opportunity to travel and like find themselves and do all the things that are more complicated to do when you have children. But yeah, I always knew it wasn't that I just, thought that's the age to do it. It was just sort of life circumstances that meant that I had them at that age.
Was there something about the experience of having children that really kind of caught you off guard or took you by surprise, in a good or bad way?
I think I think children are the best of times and the worst of times, honestly. They really are. And children, my children, if you're watching this, I love you. But we used to have this thing where I'd say goodnight to them in the evenings, and I'd say, good night, I love you, even though you drive me absolutely. And my kids would go crazy. I was like, yeah. Kids are wonderful. They're wonderful. I love my children, but it's also a lot of hard work, and I think what surprised me in the good is just that, having kids is it's wonderful. It's wonderful seeing them grow up. It's wonderful seeing them become humans, people in their own right. I loved the baby stage, but I wasn't, again, I mentioned I wasn't super into babies as a midwife. That wasn't why I became a midwife. And I loved the baby stage, but I kind of prefer the, watching movies together or having conversations, or, I'm really enjoying
I don't love a baby.
Yeah.
An infant, so boring.
Yeah, young children can be really boring, or the life around young children can be very repetitive and
not very
monotonous.
stimulating.
Yeah, it's not stimulating, which is why, and particularly for me, because I was at home all those years, that got to a point that I was just not enjoying it anymore, But I love seeing them grow. I love seeing the people they're becoming. I have been very emotional about that recently because of my daughter going to college, and, it's a very strange thing. It's almost like I'll have these moments with her where I'm kind of observing her, because I know, in the past few weeks, I've just taken her to college literally a couple of weeks ago. And in the run up to that, I'll find myself like watching her and thinking, my God, she's become this amazing young woman. And then I suddenly get these like flashbacks, almost like her life jumping in front of my eyes of all these different stages of all these, this person who is this whole human being, but that was also a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and who, she doesn't really remember as clearly as I do, but I had relationships with all those people, and they were all very different, because they needed different things from me, and they were going through different things. So that's kind of surprising and it's just surprising how fast it goes. It goes so fast, you think it doesn't, but it does. I can't believe it. I've got 2 years left before my son will be leaving home. I mean, the not so good part of it, I think I kind of alluded to earlier on, is just that your identity changes in a great way because you become a mother and you really lean into all of that. And I loved, aspects. I'm a very maternal person, I loved like nursing my children. That I thought was amazing, like connection to have with another human being. The fact that I grew these giant babies from my body and then nursed them from my body, and they grew even more enormous. Like, it's kind of mind blowing. That connection is really special. But I remember the first time that my mum came round to take my daughter, my first child, out to the park was the same day that my husband went back to work. Like, he had 2 weeks paternity leave. He went back to work.
2 weeks, my God.
2 weeks. He went back to work. My mum came round and said, I'm going to take Poppy out to the park. And it was the first time I'd been on my own. And I went to try and have a nap. And then I suddenly was like consumed with these thoughts of like, well, who am I now? I mean, I was very I just had a baby. So my hormones were like all over the place. But I remember just thinking, well, who am I now? I'm Lindsay, but I'm a mother first. And I have to keep this child alive. I have to make sure she's okay and everything. And just all these thoughts of like who I had been before, I was a mother first, I was still a midwife, I was a wife, but like who I was and what, was important to me was just so low down in the list at that point. It felt like this flip of my identity.
Yes.
And it was a very confusing feeling to have because I was so happy to be a new mum. I was so elated. I was so amazed that she was there and was so in love with her. But at the same time, it was shocking to me how much I felt like my identity had to just take a back seat and how scary that was. And I was, sobbing at home, very, like I say, very sort of, postnatal, postpartum hormones in play as well. And that continues for quite a while. I mean, I used to, and if there's anyone listening who's just had a baby, and this resonates, I hope it resonates, but I used to sort of complain to other friends who'd had babies. I was like, there is a conspiracy going on, because I would talk to these other mums at mother and baby groups, and they would sit there and go, this has been it's been the best thing that's ever happened to me. It's changed my life. Like it's so perfect. Everything's wonderful. And I'd sit there and think, well, I've just not slept at all, and I feel terrible, and I don't feel like I'm doing anything right. And, I can barely get a shower before midday. And, I just felt like there's this kind of conspiracy amongst mothers to never admit publicly or to their friends that it's really hard, because it is really hard. It's really, really, really hard. And the number of women I've met who I've seen like on the verge of tears when they've got young babies, and all I have to do is say, it gets better. And they just
let go.
Because no one will admit it, because it's almost like saying, that you're not enjoying it or you don't want your kids. It's not that at all. It's just you can have both things. You can love your children, but also know it's really difficult.
I'm curious how you, as someone who does have such a strong sense of identity now, do you feel like you had to get divorced to really have that strong sense of self?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know how it would have turned out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't know what that kind of sliding doors moment would have looked like on the other side. I do know that I just felt very invisible at that time. In terms of, other than being a mum, I was very focused on that. I was very unhappy in my marriage. So, and I think in a way that stopped me from having more friendships too, because I just felt like I had nothing to offer. Mums at the school gate would be like, oh, we should hang out. And I would just think, well, why? I'm just going to tell you how miserable I am. I don't feel like a very attractive proposition to be a friend. And it's funny, I met with a friend of mine gosh, I don't know, a couple of years ago we had lunch. She was over. She used to live here. She lives in Copenhagen now. And she said to me, she said, oh, Lindsay, you look, this is terrible impersonation. I'm sorry, gosh. She's like, Lindsay, you look so good. You look so fresh, so clean, so stylish, like this. And I was like, oh, really? She went, yes. Always you just used to wear gray jumper, blue jeans, gray jumper, blue jeans, gray sweater, blue jeans. And I did. I just used to live in this uniform and just be kind of like, you know.
I bet it was chic.
Kind of wasn't. But yeah, I don't know if it was the divorce. I think it was certainly getting divorced definitely made me take a look at who I was. I can remember I was really into running around the time we separated, and for some time before and after, and probably because it gave me time to be alone and to, you know, be away from my children and my husband and just have time where I was working on something for myself. And I remember after we broke up, I can clearly remember running down this specific bit of this hill in Prospect Park and thinking to myself, what do I like? Like, what music do I like? What do I like to do? And I'm a big music fan. I would describe myself as like a music nerd. Like I have good taste in music. I know my music. But I'd even got to the point that I was like letting my husband be the person that would like pick the music we'd listen to all the time. I had like no influence on that because we'd just become this team that, you know, took on roles in certain ways where I didn't express the things that were really important to me, or I'd kind of lost track of what was really important to me as myself, you know. So I remember on this run, like, what do I like? You know, what do I want to listen to? What do I want to do? You know, and around that time, so I started to go and see more music. I started to go to lots of storytelling things like Moth. Do you know Moth? That's like true stories. And like selected shorts and stuff at the 92nd Street. So I could be amongst other people, connecting with strangers, you know, hearing people's stories, just getting myself out in the world. But it was, and that's what I say to lots of people when they're divorcing or when they're going through a life change, or even now, I'm thinking about that a lot more now too, going into this next chapter of being an empty nester. Like, what do you like? What do you want? You know, what do you want your life to be? And that was, so I think divorcing definitely made me take that on and made me pay attention to that and try and create a life that was meaningful to me. And again, it was a slow process. Like, you know, I'm not someone who got it sorted quickly. There were a lot of ups and downs, and there was a lot of sort of drama and, you know, mistakes and failures and everything. But I think that really helped, and that really helped me find myself again, just by focusing on what was important to me and what I liked, you know.
So you're dating at 52?
I am. Well, when I can be bothered, yeah.
When you can be bothered. Tell me about it. How is it?
Well, first of all, I think it's so funny that people are like, oh my gosh, are you out there? It's so good for you. Like, I think people will go, oh, it's so great.
I didn't say good
no,
for
you. Didn't. No, you didn't. But I think there's this idea of like, oh, it's so great. You're still putting yourself out there. Like I'm geriatric or something. I know you didn't say that, but there is a kind of vibe about that like at 52, wow, you're, you know. And it is kind of a shit show, I have to say.
Well, that's why.
In fact, it's not even kind of a shit show. It's a colossal shit show.
Because men at 52, they're not on the same level as a woman at 52.
When are men ever on the same level as
True.
women? I mean,
but I mean, I fear you have two types, right? One is either men who have always been single, basically, in which case, what's going on there? Or men who are divorced, which statistically, in the vast majority of cases, means a woman left them. And if a woman said, I would rather go be single again and be a single mom than stay married to your ass, what's going on with that guy?
There is that. Which is why it would be so great if you could just ask for a reference from the person's previous partner, right?
Yes, I always want to interview them.
I'm thinking of dating your ex-husband. What can you tell him about?
Yes.
It would be wonderful. It's funny because I was thinking about this morning, and I was realizing, you know, I'm on and off the apps, which seems to be something that you have to do if you want to ever go out on dates. You know, although I do meet people in real life too. And I was thinking this morning, I haven't checked the apps for like a few days or whatever, because I don't have time. You know, like I'm not really. And I think in the past I wouldn't have felt like that. I would have been like, I've got to. I have friends who treat dating or being on the apps like full-time jobs. You know, they're doing the numbers game. I'm not doing that so much because I'm not, as I said earlier, I'm happy on my own. So I don't feel this huge urge to make sure I'm having, you know, although I did promise a girlfriend of mine that I would try and have 2 FaceTimes a week. That was the goal she made me set, like just 2 FaceTimes, at least 2 FaceTimes.
With potential dates.
With potential dates, yeah. And that's something I have been doing actually, is rather than going to meet people off the bat is doing a FaceTime first. And I have to say, I think that's a good tactic. It saves you getting ready, getting into town or whatever, you know, wasting all that time when you're going to literally turn up and within 2 seconds know, oh no, this is not going to work. So it gives you like a kind of low stakes buffer to kind of work out if there could be something there and you're interested to meet someone in real life. So I do that. And yeah, there's a mix of men at my age. A lot of the men my age are not dating women of my age. So
that's the other thing. Good
yeah,
Lord.
Yeah.
How embarrassing for them, by the way.
Well, I mean, I have long conversations with my single male friends of my age about this.
Wow.
And I'm kind of like, you know, dude, what are you doing? I mean, although saying that, I feel like I need to be more open-minded, and I've tried to be more open-minded about dating younger myself.
But that's different. That's so different.
Yeah, I mean, my theory on men dating much younger women is that it's only, first of all, it's only legal for a certain portion of your life. Right?
Yeah, no kidding.
Like if you're dating someone who's 20 years younger, when you're 20, that's not going to happen. When the guy's 30, that's illegal. When he's 40, it's only just legal, right? When he's 50, great, you'll probably have a great time. When he's 60, I think your girlfriend's going to start thinking, oh, he's a little old, he doesn't want to go out so much. You know, when you're 70 and you're dating someone around my age, I don't want to be dating someone who's 70. So I think there's only like longevity, and not for everybody. I know there are plenty of relationships with big age gaps that work. I know there are. I mean, my stepfather is almost 11 years younger than my mother, and they've been together since I was 15. I know, that's true, actually. That's true. I like this theory that it's okay for women. Okay, let's stick with that. It's okay.
No. I'm going to start
dating way younger.
It is you, but you should. Well, you should of all people, because you look substantially younger than your age, I feel, and you are just. I feel like you have the vibe of someone. Like for a man to be on par with you, he's realistically going to need to be substantially younger, I think. Just in terms of the lust for life and what you have to offer and the dynamic. No, but it's true. But also, I think there's something deeply, deeply different about an older man dating a younger woman and an older woman dating a younger man, both for what it says about the respective couples, because there's always something very inherently different about a relationship that is quite distinctly and intentionally going against what society is pressuring you to do. And I think it says something about both parties. But also because typically when women are prized for their youth, that is, you know, it's a very intentional thing and a very deeply superficial thing and a very sort of societally mandated thing. And it's about sort of what it reflects on the man and all of these different things. Women generally are not sorting for a younger man. That's not what they're seeking out. That's not like necessarily a value add. In fact, for my female friends who date younger men, it is often a total surprise to them and they weren't expecting it, and he sort of had to win her over and all these things. So I think, and yes, this is a plug, my first romance novel, the woman was 12 years older than the man. But I do think very, very strongly that there is something about it that has almost nothing in common with men who date younger women. I feel like, I mean, look, when I was much younger, I dated older guys. Like my first few boyfriends were substantially older than me. But I think that you know, and I very much know that that's probably because I didn't have much of a relationship with my father, and I was looking for like a, father, whatever. You know, as I got older, I wanted to date people my own age. I do think there's a thing, because I know I was like that when I was younger. I do think there is a certain man who wants to date younger because, you know, younger people look great and they're fun and they've got energy, but also wants someone who's not going to challenge them so much. Exactly.
Who wants a partner who's going to go, you're so great, because they look at these men and think, well, they're established in their life, they have disposable income or more disposable income than these younger women might have. You know, there's something sexy about, you know, having your shit together. And I think a lot of these men, in the eyes of those women, seem like they have their shit together. And for the men, they've got a hot younger woman saying, you're so great, everything you do is so great, you know, versus potentially an ex-wife or an ex-partner of their own age who's going, what are you fucking talking about? You know, like who's not going to take what they're saying as, you know, as gospel, and who's going to challenge them. And I think that's a lot of the reason it happens. But again, you know, you guys do you. Like, I know there's lots of couples who make this work, and I'm not like poo-pooing it. I am. Well, it certainly makes it difficult. I mean, I think there was an episode of Sex and the City where
it's the one
with Candice Bergen, and she's the Carrie's editor or whatever, and they go to that party, and and Carrie's dating the older guy,
Yep.
and Candice Byrne goes up to her and says, I should be
You're
dating
swimming
him.
in my
You're
kiddie
swimming in
pool."
my, yeah. And I do feel a little like that. And the only way around that really for me, on the apps for sure, is for me to lie about my age. And I'm not going to do that. I don't want to be like these guys who say, I know I said I'm 49, I'm actually 72. The app wouldn't let me change it, which is just bullshit. You know, they put it there because they wanted to say to you, I know you're only looking for men in this age group, but I'm going to show you how fun and young and sexy I am.
Ugh.
Because I'm not going to listen to what you want. I'm going to tell you what you want. Because I'm the exception, and I don't want to be that.
Yeah, no.
But I do know that my friends who are, younger than 50, there's a bigger pool of men out there. There's also lots of younger men who would allegedly like to date me in terms of the matches that I get. But that's kind of feels a little strange to me. I mean, the fact that when I was in my 20s, I thought 40 was so old, and now someone who's 40 to me is a baby, like a
But
baby.
52 feels very young to me.
Well, I'm glad of that, and that's why we will become friends.
Yes, we will. It's mandated.
But 40 feels young to me.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I know I need to be more open-minded about dating younger and a little bit older. I know I need to put myself out there a bit more, but I'm also not willing to settle. I think I've been in relationships in the past that I probably would have left a lot earlier if I'd known my worth and my value. And I think I put up with things because I thought, well, what else is there for me? Because I didn't, like myself as much as I sound like an asshole, but I like myself now. I like myself. I think I'm a pretty cool person. I like my life. I like the things I think. I like the things I do. I like how I am with my friends, my children. So if someone's not bringing something to add to that, if they're going to take away from that, or if they're going to kind of, if they're going to disrupt my peace that I've made in this life, I don't want that anymore. So I'm very, I'm kind of almost hyper vigilant to red flags, probably more than I should be. I probably don't give people the benefit of the doubt as much as I should. I may end up alone because of that, but and I'm not cool with it. I'm not sort of going, I'm just going to be alone forever, and that's fine. I do want to be with someone. I feel like this is like my greatest dating advertisement, isn't it?
No, it is.
But I'm not willing to do that at any cost. I want to build a life with someone. I want someone who is, I can have great conversations with, who I can have adventures with, who I can laugh with. And I want someone who's going to come to the table, their own fully formed person, and established and capable of looking after themselves and having their own life too. So we can both have our lives and we can have a life together. And I think that's a tall order.
Is the last topic I wanted to really talk to you about. So you mentioned, I asked if you were a model when you were younger. And you said I was actually scouted very recently to be a model.
I was.
And so I really...
TBD,
but I think that would be incredibly chic. Now, I want to hear, A, kind of your philosophy on beauty and aging, but B, have you ever had any work done of any kind?
I have had, well, let's start with have I had any work done? I think it's probably quite clear that right now I haven't, because I have many lines on my face. In the past, I've tried Botox a couple of times. I tried fillers once. I thought I looked like sort of, a demented kind of maniac with the fillers. I've seen pictures of myself back now at that time with like big cheeks, and frozen bits here, so when I smile it all kind of shifts up there and I look a little demented.
And you have strong cheekbones to begin with.
Well, yeah, but apparently you lose all that stuff and you got to plump it up and la la la. So at the moment I'm or certainly for the last 3 years or so I've not had anything done, and I'm sitting with that. And it's interesting because I have an 18-year-old daughter, and I'm very mindful of what I present to her, right? Am I going to be a mother who makes her feel like she shouldn't age and she has to be aware, that that's a bad thing? Or am I going to, show her what a normal, natural, not normal, but natural face looks like? And interestingly, she is very much, and her friends too, are very much into me not doing any of that stuff. So my hair is really going white at the moment. And I don't know, it's very bright in here and it probably will show up as that, but I still have, I'm a natural blonde. I would get highlights in my hair. but now I'm getting like white streaks. And if I sort of part my hair in different ways, you'll see a lot of white coming through my hair. And so I haven't had my hair dyed for probably almost a year now because of my daughter. Because my daughter keeps saying, don't do it. I love that white in your hair. It's so pretty. It's such a lovely color. It's, you know, let it go white. I want it just, she keeps thinking that I can just make it go all white. And I'm like, it's not quite there yet. But she's like, don't color it. And actually, when we were in London recently, one of our family friends, her daughter, a 16-year-old, was saying the same thing. My daughter was saying to her, she wants to color her hair. I keep saying not to do it. And our friend's daughter, Elkie, was like, no, don't do it. It's so good with the white. So that was fascinating to me, to have, you know, kids of that age saying, don't cover it up, you know. And also when I had this, you know, I did an interview almost a year ago, not an interview, but like a, you know, a vox pop in the streets where someone asked me a question and whatever. And it kind of went.
Are those real?
Huh?
Was it really
yeah,
random?
I'd
Wow.
literally just been at like an interview for a job, and I was walking down the street and someone said, can I interview you? And I was like, what? And they said, it's for this, you know, Instagram thing. We're just going to ask you one question. And I was like, I don't think so. And then they were like, no, we'll just, and they told me what the question was. And I thought, no, maybe I have something interesting to say on that. So I answered it. And funnily enough, I knew, so I'd done it. I was waiting for it to be posted on Instagram, and they took about 2 weeks to post it. And so during that whole time I was thinking, oh God, it must have been terrible, or it must have looked terrible. They must have decided not to post it. And they finally posted it over Thanksgiving when I was staying with some friends. And, you know, the first thing I'm looking at when they posted it, I'm not even listening to what I'm saying. I'm just looking at how I look, right? Because this has gone out in the world and people I know are going to see it. And wouldn't it be embarrassing if I look terrible? And it kind of went viral. It got like a ton of attention. And the majority of the comments were about how great it was to see somebody aging gracefully, and how great it was to see somebody who hadn't had work done. And there were a few people who were sort of saying, oh, she's definitely had work done. To which I was responding, I haven't, you know.
Yeah.
But one of the loveliest comments was someone who called me something like Lindsay sunray eyes. And I was like, what's sunray? And I realized he was talking about my laughter lines. And I thought, we don't talk about, you know, your wrinkles, like people's wrinkles like that. We don't give them lovely names. We just try and get rid of them, right? We try and not have them. But the fact that this person said Lindsay sunray eyes, and I thought, that's so lovely. And also the fact that, you know, your laughter lines are a sign that you've laughed a lot, right? That's how you get them. You've had a well-lived life. So at the moment, I'm in the camp of seeing how it goes and not wanting to do anything. But that said, my own feed is full of facelift stuff, and probably because I watch it and because I'm interested in it, and because I haven't written off, you know, it's a never say never situation. Yes. But at the same time, I'm also very much aware of how that stuff is presented to you. I mean, I don't know if you're like me and you get into that that sort of doom scrolling thing, or like, you know, you'll be listening. I think I was listening to a podcast. I think it was Smartless. And John Hamm was being interviewed, who's so hot. I mean, he's so hot. He's around my age.
He's such a terrible person, but he is hot.
Oh, okay.
My goodness. He almost killed a man, you know.
Did he really?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
It's crazy that he's even not in prison, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, but
he's
hot, right? Sure. So I was listening, and I was in traffic, and I was listening to this podcast, and I was doing that thing of going, oh, I wonder if he's single. Not that I was thinking I was going to date John Hamm,
probably
but
date
just
you.
Like, you know... you know, bored kind of, in the same way you're like, how tall is John Hamm? Like, sure. I was like, is John Hamm single? And instantly a you know, article comes up with him with his much younger, I think now wife, but girlfriend. I'm He's sorry, John Hamm. I'm sure you're very happy. But at some gala or whatever, 20 years younger. And I read this thing because the traffic wasn't moving, so I was looking. And as I got to the bottom of the article, the first ad that was there was an older woman, and it was an ad for facelifts. Yeah. And I just thought, people are crafty. You know, they just know that I'm reading something about younger women dating men of my age, and then right there it's like, you need a facelift. It's just so subtle, and so that's the thing that I think about a lot is, you know, in the same way that men who are dating younger women, their message to us is that we're too old to be loved, right? Yeah. The men of my age who are dating much younger women are sort of casually saying to me, you're too old to love. And the way that we think about constantly looking younger, the message that we're getting is that if we look old, that's not lovable. So that's what I am sort of, look, you might see me a couple of years from now and I'm cinched all over. And like I say, I'm never say never. But I also like the idea, I have this image of myself, I'm liking the fact that my hair is going whiter.
It looks beautiful.
I want to grow it longer and longer. I kind of want to have like long white hair. I want to have laughter lines. I want to, by the time I'm in my 90s, have like, a map of my life on my face.
Yes.
And for that to be seen as beauty. Wouldn't that be amazing? That you can see that someone has lived, and that's beautiful. So that's kind of where I'm at and what I think about it. And I've also got obsessed with watching shows and movies and sort of going, wait, why is her face not moving?
I do have a few rapid fire questions that I'm asking all of my guests. So off the dome, whatever comes to mind, I'm pulling them up. What is something about aging that we don't talk about enough?
A really weird thing in that, and it doesn't happen all the time, but when it does happen, it's really satisfying, which is when you have memory, when you experience things at this age and you have memories of yourself at a younger age and those kind of things collide. And so here's an example. My daughter really loves the Mamas and the Papas for some reason. She's like really into that band. And one morning when I went into her bedroom, she was like lip syncing the Mamas and the Papas in front of her mirror. And it was this song, this is dedicated to the one I love, right? So I just automatically went up and started like singing it with her. And had this wonderful moment in the morning. But what she didn't know was when I was 20, I used to sing in bands. And one night, my band and another guy's band, we performed that song on stage. And so as a 20-year-old girl, I sang with like 7-part harmonies, this song. And at that time, I was a very different person. And I never would have imagined that I was going to have a daughter who one day, like, decades later, I would be standing in front of a mirror singing this song. So that like combination, that amalgamation of remembering that person that you were combined with who you are now is so satisfying, when those kind of experiences collide, because you get to remember that girl who had no idea what life was going to be and who had no certainty about what was going to happen. And, and you combine that with where you are now. Does that make sense? It's
totally.
Very, very satisfying. So moments like that.
What is the most important thing you've learned about money in the past few decades?
I think that, it's a bit of a cliche to say it, but like, the best time to invest was however many years ago, and the second best time is today, to not wait anymore. Even if you can invest a small amount, or even if you can save a small amount, compound interest and the appreciation of property is incredibly powerful for wealth.
We agree with that. What is the most important thing you've learned about relationships in the past few decades?
I think that you have to let someone have their own life. I think that if you feel like a relationship is only successful if you do everything together, and if that person is everything to you, if I see someone on a dating app and they say, I'm looking for my best friend, I'd swipe left, because I'm not going to be your best friend. I'm going to be your partner, but I'm not going to be everything. I have a best friend. I don't need you for that. So I think it's really important that people allow their partner to have their own life, their own interests that are separate from them. Yes, you want to go and ski with your buddies or go on a cycling tour, whatever it is, go do it, because you'll enjoy yourself, you'll feel good about yourself, and you'll come back to me a better version of yourself.
Lastly, what advice would you give to a 30-something woman who is currently single, without kids, and not where she wants to be financially?
Well, the first thing I'd ask her is, which of those things are important to you? Because it sounds like those are all things that society is telling you that you should have, that you should have a boyfriend or a husband, that you should have children, that you should have whatever amount of money. I didn't get my degree until I was, I didn't go to college till I was 29, but I finished top of my year, even though I didn't finish high school. I didn't really find my stride in my job until I was in my late 40s. I think if you look at those things with a deadline or a time limit of when you're supposed to have had got your shit together, you're always going to feel like you're failing. Life is long. There is a long time to do these things. I only really started investing in my retirement in the last 5 years. And yeah, I'm playing catch up. I wish I'd started doing it earlier. And that would be my other piece of advice, is start as early as possible, because it's then a very slow incline of what you have to do versus like climbing Everest to try and catch up. But don't be so hard on yourself. Take your time. Lots of people come into their prime in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Life is long. Don't worry, and work out which of those things are really important to you versus what you think you're supposed to be doing.
Lindsay, this has been such a pleasure. I cannot even tell you I have loved this conversation. Our viewers who are sitting with us, producers, have also been thrilled with this conversation. For our audience who is sure to fall in love with you, as we have, where can people go to find you? Are you on social media?
I am. I have 2 social media accounts because I kind of have a business one and a personal one, but my personal one is kind of my business one too. I'm at Lindsay Owen NY, so Lindsay Owen, New York.
We'll link you guys.
And you can find me at Compass as well. Just look me up on the website.
Let her help you find your dream home.
I would love to help people find their homes.
All right, well, thank you. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. And I will see you back here for the next episode of Just Getting Good. Bye, guys.